Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, October 12th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The baseball playoffs roll on, and so do our conversations with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy. Today we talk pitching. The Royals got young in 2021. They became the first team in Major League history to have 5 players start games in the major leagues from the same draft class for the team that drafted them. And how about this stat? In 2019, the last full year of baseball before this year, pitchers who were 26 years and older made 113 starts for the Royals. This year, it was 51. What does that say about the future? We talk about it and much more on today's show. So let's get started talking Royals pitching with Lynn Worthy. Lynn, you watching any of the baseball playoffs?
Yeah, I watched, seems like I've watched parts of a few games here and there. I was watching some of that Tampa-Boston game the other night where they had the weird call with the play at the wall where they ended up, was that like the 12th, 13th inning, whatever inning that was. And then I feel like I've seen parts of some other games too. I know I saw part of actually, I think I watched all of the wild card games, or at least the American League wild card game, and then I think part of the National League, and probably going to watch some of this White Sox and Astros. So yeah, I'm not necessarily sitting down and camped out for all of them, especially since some of them are pretty lengthy, but watching parts of a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm struck by, look, there were a lot of runs in the Red Sox-Rays series, but for the most part, I'm kind of struck by how good the pitching has been in the National League side of the bracket. And I wanted to talk pitching with you today with when it comes to the Royals. You know, if there was one word to describe the Royals pitching, both from a starters and a bullpen standpoint, but especially the starters, it would be young. The Royals were a young pitching staff this season. You had a couple of really interesting stats and facts in story you wrote recently, kind of wrapping up the season, that I wanted to get into a little bit. One was, and I didn't realize this, in 2019, the last full season of baseball, pitchers who were 26 years and older had 113 starts. And this year, pitchers 26 years and older had 51 starts. So that is that's quite the change, and probably a direction a lot of people like seeing with the Royals. They did get young this year on the mound, and they took their lumps for sure. But how well does it bode for the future?
Well, how well it bodes, I guess, is open to interpretation. I mean, I guess the one thing you have is at least you shouldn't even say you have. You think you have is you've got room for growth. You think you've got upside. You think you've got still strides to be made. Whereas, a couple years ago, when you're looking at that rotation where, that year you cited, you're talking about guys like Homer Bailey made a lot of starts that year. Duffy made starts. I'm trying to think who else was in that group there. But you had some older guys made starts who had been around for a while, who were pretty much, for the most part, what they were going to be. Whereas you look at the group this year and you're saying to yourself, well, there still might be more to get out of Chris Bubic. There still might be more to come for Daniel Lynch, for Carlos Hernandez, for guys like Jackson Kowar. There's Brady Singer. Like, there's still steps to be made. Maybe even Brad Keller. So you're not necessarily saying, okay, well, these guys are what they're going to be. There's as they like to say, there's stuff to dream on there with some of these guys as far as, improvement and what they might be able to be. Yet they're already in the major leagues and producing. So, everybody talks about it now is stuff. You talk about the stuff that some of these guys are throwing out there, whether it's Daniel Lynch or Carlos Hernandez. I mean, it's some of the best stuff you're going to see. So just in terms of their repertoire pitches, their velocity, their movement, all that. So there's reason to believe that there's more to come. And, they're still, they were competing with just getting their feet wet this year.
Boy, there were some moments, especially after the All-Star break, with Carlos Hernandez, Bubic, with Daniel Lynch had some starts that were just, so promising. But as you might expect from pitchers this young, consistency wasn't there, and we didn't get the encouraging performance from Jackson Kowar, which is kind of fascinating. The guy dominated AAA, but every time he took the mound for the Royals, it just seemed like trouble followed him and couldn't get it done. So if we were projecting a rotation for the next season, the way the season opened, who would be in there among these? I've listed about 7-8 different candidates for a rotation next year. Who would you have in there? Or guess?
Well, the first thing I would say is that all 7 or 8 are probably going to get starts at some point. Like everybody who likes to try and make a big deal out of, okay, these are your 5 pitchers. It's like, it's never 5 pitchers. It's never going to be 5 pitchers. It's never been 5 pitchers. It's always, I shouldn't say never been. I'm sure back in the day when the guys were throwing to their arms fell off, you could have had 5 pitchers and, just keep rolling them out there. But not today's game. So I think, especially when you think about pitchers who've got innings under their belt, who've got experience, and you still need that, especially with guys who are, coming off of their first full season in the majors, some of them didn't even really get a full season's worth of innings. So I think you still got to count on Keller and Minor to be 2 of your guys, your workhorse guys, the guys that give you innings, because if you think you're just going to throw a bunch of guys who've had, 40 starts or less in the majors out there and from start to finish of a major league season, I just don't see it. And I don't think it's going to work out the way you think it is, if that's what you think you're going to do. So I think Keller and Minor have to be in there at least to start. Later in the season, who knows? But then after that, it gets interesting because I think, you look at what Carlos Hernandez did and you'd say, as well as he's pitched and as much of a jump as he's made, you'd say he's probably got to be one of the guys who's in there. You think about, Singer and Bubic as guys who, were in the rotation last year and this year and who've had more experience than these other young guys. And then you also talk about a guy like Daniel Lynch, who's their top pitching prospect, who they brought up early initially because they had eyes on him being part of that rotation going forward. And he's shown some really good starts, and ability to compete even when he didn't have his best stuff. So there's 6 guys right there, and probably 6 don't start to start the season. So the question is which one starts in the bullpen or it starts at AAA. I'm not even sure if it's bullpen because people want to start shifting guys to bullpen. And I'm like, well, you still, like I said, you're going to need 7, 8, 9 guys. You start making guys bullpen guys as though you have, 20 options. You have more depth than you had, but I don't think you got 20 guys. I don't think you got all the pitching depth in the world. I think, to start just counting off or, just moving guys and saying, okay, well, he's not a starting pitcher anymore. That's going to come back to bite you. And if you start flip-flopping guys around, sometimes that doesn't work out. Another guy that we're not mentioning probably in that 8 or 9 right now, just because of last year, is Jacob Junis. And you saw that flip-flopping around didn't exactly work out for him this season. So, and he's another guy that probably factors in somewhere, maybe in the bullpen. So out of those 6, the question of who starts in the bullpen or in the AAA or who's not in that 5 gets pretty interesting in my mind. I'm not sure. Did I have a good answer? I think some people want to jump to Singer because of not really having that third pitch. But I think consistency-wise, you can make a case that he's, over the last 2 seasons, been a little bit more consistent than what you've seen from Bubic. But to finish the season, Bubic looked really good at times to make you say, okay, well, maybe he's found it. Maybe he's figured it out. So I'm not sure who the odd man out is out of that group of 6. I'm not sure if we're going to know until spring training. I'm sure they'll have a plan going into spring training. I'm fairly sure they won't tell us what that plan is going to be. And then we'll see how things play out. But I think those are the 6 guys that I would say right now you got to look at and then figure it out from there on who's going to be your depth in AAA, whether that means somebody like Bubic starts in AAA again or they do something else. And that's assuming, of course, that you don't have additions through the offseason.
Right. I mean, that's always a possibility. In fact, you hear, I've heard it suggested that the Royals should go out and get a veteran, successful. Obviously, they want successful, but a veteran presence to, they have that in Mike Minor, but maybe an additional player like that. And Royals fans of 10 years ago will remember how they went out and got James Shields and how that really was a kind of an important acquisition for the Royals, not to mention Wade Davis, but the addition of Shields was great for the clubhouse for young pitchers at the time. And he gave him, not only gave him great leadership, but he also was well over 200 innings pitched in a couple of years for the Royals. This year, Mike Minor led the team with, I think, 158 innings pitched. So I'm not going to get hung up on innings by these starters because, as you said, you're going to end up with a bunch of starters during a year anyway. I think the whole idea of needing to have guys give you workhorse guys, give you 200 innings. I don't know if you need that as much, as long as you have guys that can go out and get you 6 innings in a game, and that seems to be more important. But how about the prospects of the Royals adding, going out and getting a veteran arm to complement this rotation?
And the interesting part about that is, ideally, I think you'd probably, if you're going to do that, you'd probably go more likely through a trade than free agency, because you don't expect that they're going to go out and spend big money on a veteran guy and to get proven veteran pitching on the free agent market that's going to cost you big money. And for the Royals, that's I don't know that they could get into that sort of bidding war. I mean, and if you do, are you getting you're probably getting more of a Minor type. That's how they got Minor, was, getting out there early in free agency, getting him for not big money. If you're looking for something, maybe a front of the rotation guy, proven veteran type guy, is probably either you're going to spend more than probably what the Royals are able to spend or willing to spend, or you're doing it through trade. And that's kind of the question of, okay, what's out there in the trade market? What did you have to give up? What can you get? So I don't know that I wouldn't say that I'm expecting that type of a move. I mean, it'd be interesting if they went that route, if that signals what they feel like they have, what position they're in coming into next season. But not something I would necessarily expect. But at the same time, we talk about the innings. Again, some of these guys still don't have that many innings under their belt. So to think that they're going to go and, make it through a full season next year is also, I don't know if that's a leap that I'd necessarily be willing to assume either. I mean, even a guy like Hernandez, I think this year total, it's a little bit over 100 and some innings. I mean, not even 130, not 150. I mean, it's, for a guy like Carlos Hernandez, who has looked as good as he has, but to expect he's going to be one of your main guys in the rotation next year, you're still making a big leap. I mean, so I'm pulling it up here now. It's 26 and a third at AAA this season, and then 85 and 2/3 in the majors. So that's all he threw this year, coming off of last year with the pandemic year. So next year, to think he's going to be a 170 innings guy, I don't know how realistic that is, and I don't know what that's going to look like if you try and push it to that. So you got to have some guys, and that's why people just want to say, "Oh, go all with the young guys." It's like, well, young guys might not be there at the end of the season, or young guys, if you were to make a playoff push, what happens when you're shutting them down? Because it wasn't but a couple years ago, 2019, when Keller and Junis got shut down before the end of the season because they were getting to innings limits. So to think that all of a sudden they're just going to blow past those with these guys, I don't think you're really thinking it through.
It's a good point. Hey, let me to underscore the youth factor on this rotation. Another nugget from story that you wrote recently. The Royals were the first team in major, and I'm reading from your story. First team in Major League history to have 5 players from the same draft class start games in the major leagues for the team that drafted them, and that and that group didn't include Carlos Hernandez. I mean, so that really does point to where the experience is for this team. And Keller is 25, Bubic 23, Singer is 24, so is Lynch and Hernandez. So really, at least spring training, a lot to look forward to with the development of this rotation. Let's take a break here, Lynn, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation and hone in on the bullpen.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
Okay, we're back with Lynn Worthy. We're talking Royals pitching. Before we dismiss the starters here, I just thought that was a really interesting stat that you had, and of course that was kind of well known when as Royals were making starts toward the end of the year. I think when it got to 5, was it Heasley that was the
Heasley.
5th one?
Yeah, Heasley was the 5th one. That's what put it over the
record, right?
That's what made it. Yeah, history was having 5 guys from the same draft class start games for the club to draft them in the same year. So the 5 were Brady Singer, Chris Bubic, Daniel Lynch, Jackson Kowar, and John Heasley. And they were all part of that 2018 draft class, which also included Kyle Isbell, among some others who, might not be that far away. So that was, and I think at the time that they made that history, I remember talking to Lonnie Goldberg on the phone, who's, actually was scouting director and now is going to be moved up to assistant GM player personnel. But, and he talked about how they went into that knowing that this was going to be a big draft because that was the draft that they had those compensation picks for losing Kane and Hosmer. And so, and obviously, I think it's been noted, but I think people forget that, they traded away a lot of pitching just to make the moves to get them to the World Series. And I think Witt alluded to it in the story that I posted the other day where he talked about, they gave up a lot of pitching to make that run and to go all in at the World Series, which is what you're supposed to do. This is paraphrasing Witt. And, and now they're just sort of getting to the point where they're restocked some of that pitching. And I forget what the number is. I know it was similar to the number. The Mets did the same thing to get to that World Series in 2015. But I think over a couple year period, it was double digits. I think it was 10 or 11 pitchers. And not all of those guys necessarily turned into stars or anything. But it's when you trade away over a 2-year period, 10 or 11 guys from your minor league farm system who are all pitchers. Sure, you still have guys left over, but that's a hit. That's a hit that takes a while to come back from, and that's a hit that takes time to regroup and to get yourself high caliber guys at the top levels of your farm system. And so they're just starting to get to that point now.
As we transition into the bullpen, I do want to another kind of I'm a little stat happy today, but one that I want to call your attention to is the Royals ended up in terms of pitching numbers in the major league. They were about where their record suggested they should have been, somewhere in the bottom half of the American League and certainly the bottom half of the major league in certain percentages and numbers, that sort of thing. But the one that sticks out to me is the Royals were 14th in the American League in walks, which means only one other team, I think it was the Texas Rangers, issued more walks than Royals pitchers did. And at the same time, the Royals hitters took the fewest base on balls in the major league. So Royals pitchers tend to walk, Royals hitters tend not to walk. So Royals pitchers and the Royals give up so many bases that way with their free swinging hitters, and Royals pitchers, of course, issue a lot of base on balls. So I don't know what that says, except it's not part of the organization's philosophy to take a lot of ball fours on the hitting side. But I would love to see their pitchers with more control, and maybe that's again a product of youth here. That as they I remember some of Kolar's starts. How wild he was. So just maybe that's something that will come down naturally as these young pitchers develop.
Yeah, and it's from the conversations I've had over these last couple of years, it's pretty clear to me that the ones that they're not taking, I guess you could say, as far as in the batter's box, don't drive Mike Matheny nearly as crazy as the ones that they're giving up from the pitcher's mound. And it seems like those ones, there's anecdotally the number of times that those come around to haunt them, whether it's, an inning where with 2 outs, you gave up a run, and that run was a guy who reached because it was a walk, or a guy who moved in the scoring position because of a walk. It just seemed like that came back to get them all throughout the season. Part of that, I think, is also, that as we were talking about all these young pitchers and all this, the stuff and the possibility, part of those growing pains and part of that, part of what you get with that too sometimes is guys who don't quite have the commands that, more experienced, more veteran guys, guys who maybe aren't as confident pitching the contact, or they're trying to nibble around the edges. Part of that comes with those young pitchers. So for everybody who's, gung-ho about, we got guys who are all under 25, it's like, make sure you keep that same energy for that when you're seeing them load the bases with walks. That's, that's part of it too. And obviously it's something that the Royals aren't, it's not something that they're happy with. And it's not something that they're, it's not like they're coaching guys to say, it's fine if you walk. No, that's not at all what they're getting from, I can tell you it's not all what they're getting from the manager, who's a former catcher who just can't stand it. It's not what they're getting from the pitching coach, the bullpen coach, any of those guys. So, but I think it's definitely an area they have to improve. And particularly if you got guys who are coming out of the pen that are putting guys on, those are the ones that really, I don't want to say they hurt you more, but like they stand out because those guys come into situations where it's like, okay, you've got to come in, throw strikes, whether that's giving up hits, pitching the contact, like you got to throw strikes. You can't just put guys on when you're coming into some of those situations. And so those are the ones that they really jump out at you. Their top guys, some of their top guys have been up and down with that, in the past, and they've gotten better. I mean, think of a guy like Stalmont. When he first came up, he was all walks and strikeouts, it seemed like, and he's really brought down those walk numbers from what they were a couple years ago when he debuted. So it's clearly an area that they need to work on. You'd like to hope some of that comes with the experience, but some of that's going to be just upgrading personnel overall.
Yeah, seems like Jake Brentz was one of those this year that would have bouts of wildness, and but overall was effective and gave the Royals a really nice season. In fact, he led the team in appearances with 71, one more than Scott Barlow. So overall, the bullpen I thought acquitted itself pretty well, to be honest with you. Barlow, Stalmont, Brentz especially. And toward the end, Tapia was really what a nice find he was, a nice surprise. You always want, better, right? Always seeking improvement. But the Royals have to feel pretty good about at least the 4 or 5 of their arms in the bullpen.
Yeah, they have, I mean, bullpens are always going to be, it seems like in this day and age, a year-to-year proposition. So, I mean, whatever you had the year before, sure, you'll have some pieces, but it's not like you're going to just say, okay, well, we've got our bullpen set. It's like, no, there's always going to be moving parts. There's going to be guys who have up and down years. I mean, it was it a couple of years ago at the end of 2018. Remember, Willie Peralta looked like he was going to be he turned into a mainstay bullpen type guy, and then he was released by the end of 2019. So it's year to year. That stuff just fluctuates so much. I do think that top three group there, Brent, Barlow, and Stallmont, is a group that, or those three, I would say, you can sort of pencil them in some sort of role. The next group this season, at least to me, was, you had guys like Zimmer was in there at points, but then he dropped off late in the season. Obviously Holland, who can be a free agent now that we're getting into the off season, obviously getting up there in years, was another one who was in that group where they weren't necessarily the top group, but the next guys that you could at least count on in certain situations. As the season went along, guys like Tapia and Payam sort of worked their way in there. You got a young guy like Zuber who still seems to be up and down, and he's another one who gets ends up giving up a lot of walks. So there's pieces there, but I think that top three, the Brent, Barlow, Stallman, the ones that, I would count on. And then outside after that, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. I mean, you have guys, it's not as though you're, losing guys. I mean, aside from potentially the free agents, but even if you finally do say goodbye to Holland and the Davis, you've got some guys or potentially some guys who maybe could slot in there. And then again, as we talked about a little bit earlier, whether there are some guys, not so much the young guys who you think are starters, but whether that means if that's Jacob Junis is a full-time bullpen member next year, whether that means some of these guys who potentially are coming back from injuries, Foster Griffin, or some of these other guys are part of your bullpen plan, not to mention, Tapia, Payamps. So there's going to be some options. And then it seems like they always pick up somebody, a veteran type guy on the free agent market that take a flyer on that turns out to be, half decent for them. Whether that's this year with the last couple of years, when we talk about Holland and Trevor Rosenthal, a couple of years ago, it wasn't even a pickup. It was moving a guy to the bullpen with Ian Kennedy, a veteran guy. So, I mean, that bullpen can shape out a lot of different ways. But I think, like I say, if you come back to that group of three guys and you got a left-hander in there, it'll be interesting to see what that, how that shakes out. A couple of guys who, I think one guy who maybe might have had a hand in that won't now, Richard Lovelady had the Tommy John surgery, so he's going to be out of that mix. But he would have been another guy who could have been part of that mix too.
Irvin Santana was another one of the veterans who, we'll see what he ended up being an innings eater for the Royals this year. And look, and you're talking about the top three in the bullpen, Barlow, Stallmont, and Brents. They're all of, none of them are too old, right? None of them have a lot of wear and tear on the arms. They're older than the starters that we talked about, but not as, Barlow, the oldest at 28. So look, I think there's, I agree that we were looking at, at least the top of the bullpen for next year. I think it's probably time to part ways with a couple of old friends like Holland and Wade Davis. We'll see what happens there. Wade Davis, especially, as sad as that is, as glorious as his time was with the Royals the first time, it's just, we've had this discussion before, at least you've heard me out on this discussion, I should say. It's painful to see him, get knocked around like he did this year. And because he meant so much to the 14 and 15 Royals. So anyway, enough on that. Hey,
one guy I just scrolling through here that I forgot to mention too, that we didn't really factor past the first couple of weeks of April. Jesse Hahn was a guy that they were counting on this year to be a factor in the bullpen. And he's one of I think they had 8 guys had saves this year, and he's one of them. He had it back in April, but then had the shoulder problem and just wiped him out for the rest of the season. But he potentially, I think he's I'm trying to remember what his status is. If he's arbitration still. I think he might be still in that arbitration window where he'd probably potentially get some more money, but they could still have him potentially come back next year. But yeah, and that was the other thing is they had, Barlow ended up with 16 saves, but they had something like 8 guys had saves for them, including Stallmont, Brents. I think Zimmer had a couple, Hahn, and Holland. I think Davis even had a couple in there too. So, there's guys, and they've gone to that bullpen method, that you see guys like the Rays have used and different teams have used, through the regular season. And you see it a lot in this postseason now, where it's not necessarily a one closer guy. It's guys who fit the particular situation in that matchup, and guys who they trust in high leverage more than others.
Yep. Okay, and we asked this question a couple weeks ago, but we'll end on this. If you will vote for Royals Pitcher of the Year, I think I get a vote in that too. Who would you cast your vote for?
Trying to remember. Did we do this? I feel like
we talked about it, but we haven't.
Yeah.
I don't think we have filled out a ballot yet.
Yeah, and I'm thinking. I think in my head, I'm pretty sure the way I was thinking of it last time is still the way that I'm thinking about it. Is I probably go with a guy like Barlow because of his the number of games he had an impact on, and if you're looking at rotation guys, there's a lot of guys who had up and downs. There was a guy like Hernandez obviously looked really good at times, but he was. I forget how many starts it was, but I think it was really only like 11 or 12 starts. And then he had some other appearances too. And I think innings wise, Barlow had not far off of the number of innings that, a guy like Hernandez had, because he had a shortened period in the majors. And Barlow to sort of steady that bullpen, because they had those moving parts, but the one of the guys that you could count on, whether it's in high leverage or for saves or for bases occupied situations, was Barlow. I think, Brent's had one more appearance than him. Otherwise, Barlow would have led them in appearances. And he had a lot of the high pressure situations. I think he did lead them in strikeouts. He was sort of the workhorse for them in a bullpen that at times was really taxed this season. So I think I'd probably lean towards him.
I agree. All right. Hey, Lynn, great conversation, and we'll stay in touch through the off season. But thanks for today.
No problem.
All right, beauty. All right, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
I think we'll probably will do it whenever there's news to talk about from now on, and there could be, right. I mean, that's kind of how it goes with the Royals.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not sure what the next, I don't know if they got anything that is going to be immediately jumping off, but I know they're supposed to, or at least teams are supposed to sort of try and take it easy during the playoffs, or particularly once it gets to the World Series, but some teams are more strict with that than others.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, depending on what's going on, I mean, I'm not necessarily anxious for anything to be happening. I'm just ready to take it easy.
Yeah, get on a regular sleep schedule and all that. So
yeah. So, but yeah, when there's something, or if there's something Royals related,
yeah.
I saw something the other day where somebody listed the Royals who are in the playoff, or former Royals are in the playoffs. Some of them go back a ways, so it's a ways removed. I mean, you're talking about guys like Greinke, but then there's some others who are on some teams, but I don't know if any of them are, so I mean, not that many big key guys, Kane,
right.
But some of the other ones. Yeah.
Liam Hendricks was a Royal for a bit. Nowhere near what he is now.
No. The White Sox actually have a bunch of them, because they got Billy Hamilton and Brian Goodwin are over there too.
Yeah. Hope they can win today. At least get a 5th game out of that series.
Yeah. I can't remember who was talking to, but I remember saying somebody said not a lot of people were talking about the Astros late in the season. I said that team is good. Like, I don't know, like people just sort of like, I don't know if it was because of, just the scandal stuff, whatever. I was like, but that lineup is good. And they got a couple of pitchers, and it's like, yeah, well, I mean, Astros, Red Sox, ALCS. I'm not sure that I see a real good win out of that either way. But
I agree. We've seen that series before anyway. So. Same with if the Dodgers win the NL. We've seen them against the Red Sox and the Astros the last few years. So.
And I see already they're talking Alex Cora is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I see that started last night and it's carried into this morning.
That's right.
Went from the scandal-ridden manager to now he's
just brilliant.
Brilliant. Genius, and they're running through walls for him apparently.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes on the sports call.
We'll see.
See you later. That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Bickett. Big thanks to Lynn Worthy for stopping by and talking Royals. Links to his stories and other stories about the Royals can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. So, you know about the morning sports edition, right? You don't? Well, let me tell you about it. You go to kansascity.com, that's the Stars e-edition, the replica of the printed newspaper on your screen that comes with your digital subscription. Well, now there's an updated sports section produced separately that goes along with it. When you open that e-edition, there's a box in the upper right-hand corner that says All Editions. Click on that, and you can access about, 15, 20, 25 pages of sports. It's incredible. Listen, maybe you get a link in your email. I do. It's there by about 6:30 every morning. Either way, it's access to complete coverage of the previous day's sports news, features, statistics, everything. It's fantastic, especially with the baseball playoffs going on. Okay, end of commercial. Thanks for reading the Star and listening to our podcast lineup. You're helping support the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City, and we could not produce programs like SportsBeat KC without you. We'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.